Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Today is May 13th, 2024, and I'm speaking with Jarryd. Jarryd, right? Correct?
Yes.
All right. Jarryd went to the Family Foundation School. And before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. All right, give it a thumbs up. That way it circulates better. Just a few quick announcements. Tomorrow I have Jonna coming back on for a part 2. And the 27th, Carissa will be coming back on for a part 2 as well. She was at Victory Christian Academy, and Jonna was at Happiness Hill. Now, one more, the 28th, I'm going to have James Swift on. He's a published author, and he's also a drag queen that goes by the name of Fifi Frost. We're going to talk about gender conversion therapy, and we're going to talk about drag shows. All right, just a little bit of something else. All right. So, Jarryd, what years did you go there to Family Foundation School?
It would have been 2003.
2003.
So I was 17 years old. And that's an important factor, I think, is that I was one of the kids that was not court mandated there.
Okay.
But it was pretty clear in my mind that the kids stood out that were court mandated there. But anyway, being I was 17 years old, so I've watched, I know you just mentioned a couple of the podcasts, separate from the family school that you've done and that you're doing. I want to definitely get into some of those, but personally, I watched as many episodes I could of the others that went to the specific place that I did. I will say though, shout out to the girl who did the Netflix special, the program.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Ivy Ridge sounded very similar to what we went through. Just the way it was set up, their intake, and a couple of the other things that I heard. I didn't even finish that, to be honest. So I'm still definitely viewing a lot of these other stories, and I just want to say thank you to you as well for giving us a platform to. I'm sure some of us have come together and chatted a little bit and supported each other. So that's got to be helpful for sure.
In fact, we have a survivor of the Family Foundation School watching. She goes by Your Favorite Villain. She was on here.
Shout out to her.
Yes.
For sure.
All right.
So to start at the beginning, I guess reasoning why my parents would want to send me to a place like that, even though I was not court mandated there. Just behavioral issues. A big thing that sticks out the more I've thought about it, because I chatted with you days ago, preparing to come on here. So it gives you some time to think, like some talking points, right? So for me, skipping class, for all the parents out there that their kids are reaching their teen years and they're getting a notice from the school that they're cutting class, I remember I used to get the days where I wouldn't take the bus in and I would get dropped off by a parent at the school. I'd pretty much walk in the front door and out the back door, in the sense that, it was just that easy. I think it's become a lot more difficult for these kids to literally get out of the doors of their schools and cut class, but so that's definitely good. I'm thankful for that, but that's another thing besides my behavior while I was in school and while I was out. Just that factor alone, it stands out a lot. And that's something that's hard for a parent to control, right? Because like I just said, they dropped me off at school and it was up to me. I walked out the other door and decided to cut class and mess around in the woods and smoke pot and whatever a lot of the other kids were doing. So that was my big one, was the weed. You know what I mean? I was definitely hard into it, and I heard your take on it a couple of times for a couple of different guys or girls that came on the podcast, and so at a young age, 12, 13 years old, I believe is sort of the age where kids start messing around and start going down that road, right?
Right.
So, obviously between the ages of 12 to 13, to 17, those were a very crucial 4 years of my life, right? If I went from it being introduced to me to a point where my parents were convinced by the school to send me to a boarding school to where I couldn't be in public school with the normal kids
Right.
anymore. So
You are originally from New York?
yes,
State?
upstate New York. We call it upstate, but people who are from farther upstate, uh, we would be considered, I guess, mid-state. So it's Orange County.
Okay.
I guess that it would have been a 2-hour drive to the place itself in Hancock, right?
Hancock. Yeah.
Something like that. So yeah, messing around, skipping school, smoking too much weed, doing other things that were behavioral issues, being a rebel without a cause, Dennis the Menace, whatever you guys want to call it, the class clown, all the above, all boxes that I've checked, I guess you could say. And the guidance counselors at the school are something that I'm surprised the other people who shared their stories didn't talk more about, because I know that they persuaded my parents to send me to this specific place. So that was one thing I chatted with you really quick about as well before. That's just, to me, is a huge factor, right? Because either the guidance counselors are doing that, sending multiple. So I know from my town alone, there was like 5 or 6 people that I was just acquaintance with, friends of a friend, whatever the case may be. Some I am friends with, but we all got sent to this specific place. And I didn't really hear of anybody from my school getting sent to these other places. So in my mind, thinking back to it, it seems like the guidance counselors and the public schools were in bed with the owners of this family school, in the sense that there was more to benefit from getting the kid from location A to location B, it seemed like to me, than them just doing the right thing, or them just really genuinely caring about the kid's well-being. It just seemed like a business, knowing what I know now.
That's what it is, basically.
Yeah.
It is a business. And sometimes people in that business get greedy and
Yeah. I mean,
they get sloppy.
it's like any other business, right? So, I mean, they thrive for a few years, maybe before word gets out of what's actually happening, or some horror stories of what did happen while they were doing business. And then, the truth comes to light, right? And
Yep.
that's a lot of what I've heard the others talk about. The fact that now the internet's here, now the podcasts are here, now Facebook's here. So if they would have known that, meaning the owners of the family school would have known that information, the whole thing would have just went completely different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no way half of what happened would have happened. It just wouldn't have. But I guess I'm rambling a little bit. I'll get back to the guidance counselors convincing my parents that their kid who was out of control, behaving badly, um, needed to go to this specific place. So lo and behold, let's fast forward to the pamphlet, right?
Okay.
Kids out there, if you're messing around and your parents threaten you to send you away, and it seems like it's getting a little more serious, and all of a sudden a brochure shows up on a table or in your hands, and they want you to look at it. I'm sure 9 times out of 10 the kid was, or ripped it up. I remember hearing the one kid lit his on fire. So that just shows that a kid is not going to be taking it seriously. But that is a sign that, knowing what I know now, that things are about to take place. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
remember the threats of, if you don't get your act together, you're going to go. And I remember seeing the brochure. And next thing you know, the escorts are there. So they came in at 5 o'clock in the morning. 2 gentlemen that look like football linebackers. Obviously the thought goes through your mind: should I run right now? Should I fight? Fight or flight type of thing. And you get in the handcuffs pretty quick. That's what they did for me. They put me in the handcuffs.
Oh, really?
They made me
Wow.
put on a specific pair of jeans that I did not want to wear at the time. So I think that was looking back shows kind of how delusional I was, that I thought I could even put up a fight with these guys about what kind of which exact pair of jeans I was going to wear that day. I kind of probably still didn't really register what was happening, you know?
Yeah. Good. Normally.
So we drive, and there's a letter from my parents, and I read it in the car, and I really don't know what to make of the letter. And honestly, what I was doing in the car, and maybe this speaks volumes kind of to how tragic it was or traumatic it was at the time. I was trying to remember each turn so that I could try to remember it in reverse, so that if when I run away, I can just take a left where we took a right and end up back home.
Already plotting your escape before you even got there.
Yeah, man. So, 5 o'clock in the morning, you just wake someone up. They're gonna be hungry, right? So they offer me a meal, and I ate McDonald's on the way there. I remember that. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have taken anything from any sort of, these guys are strangers, right? So yeah, I got a letter with my parents' handwriting in it, but again, it just shows, what am I going to do? Not eat or take food from a stranger? And I don't suggest taking food from a stranger from anyone. You know what I mean? It's that alone, if you get what I'm saying, could potentially be a bad situation. Right?
Yeah,
so,
could be. Yeah, it could have they could roofie you or something like that.
You're getting lower on your volume for some reason.
You get a little bit of echo too on your end.
So anyway, is the echo still there?
Yeah, it is. There should be a mic setting where you click on it and it would say.
Right now, I just muted it. Settings, audio.
It would say echo cancellation.
Yeah, it's an automatic adjust mic volume, it's called. Back. How about now?
Still there. Okay. Go ahead and keep going.
You at all right now?
You can't hear me?
I can. I guess it's coming through. Should I try to just call you right back? Hop back in?
Sure. Go ahead.
You want to do that? All right.
That'll work.
No problem.
All right. While he's getting the phone corrected here, like I said, tomorrow Jonna's going to come back on from Happiness Hill. She felt that hour just wasn't enough. She had a whole list of stuff she wanted to talk about, so she's going to come back on tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We do these on Mondays and Tuesdays at 5 o'clock. All right. Okay. He's back on here. All right. There we go. How's that? Oh, I think he just hung himself up here. Like I said, and also on the 27th, for the people that just came in, Carissa from Victory Christian Academy in Pace, Florida. Oh, she's coming back on. All right.
I'm not doing anything. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, we get there. There's the infamous steps. I walk up during my intake. It was very similar to the other kids. They're going through all my clothes and all my stuff, and you find out who your family's going to be and who your sponsor's going to be, I guess they call it. I don't remember exactly what they called the gentleman who's been through recovery. He's 40, 50 years old, and I'm the 17-year-old kid. He's going to be in charge of me in the sense of.
Okay.
So inside the families, there was other recovered addicts and alcoholics that were in charge of specific kids through the family. So that I guess it would be more organized that way. And
what family were you in?
3.
Family 3.
So on the ground floor. And okay, what's interesting about my family was that I guess they might have called it the parents of the family. who were, I guess, higher ups out of those group that was the staff, the recovered addicts themselves and alcoholics, were the owners. So for whatever reason, they chose to be the head of that family. And there was definitely, so the table topics is something that all the other kids were speaking about. It's definitely was interesting to hear their takes on that. When the one dude had mentioned how much of a form of entertainment this was for these guys, that it was like almost like a live court show, like how we watched Judge Judy and Judge Joe Brown. It was like these kids debating and going against each other, and kind of how sinister that is in itself, right? Like, you're sitting there eating your yogurt or some sort of simple meal and berating some kid who's already going through it. You know what I mean? Already has mental issues.
And it could have been something that some of them were made up. Some of the charges that were brought against them.
100%. I mean, you got kids that are in there just for acting out sexually, and sharing these stories of pretty bad things that happened between them and whoever else was close to them at the time that they're a young kid. You know what I mean? To just the kid like me, who was a raging pothead and just a rebel without a cause, just not listening to anyone. I mean, I wasn't violent. You know what I mean? I didn't get into a fist fight until after I got out of there. My first fight. So, but there was kids that were. I mean, I remember one kid came in and he didn't last but a half hour, started swinging, broke one of the guy's nose, and then he ended up getting probably manhandled, thrown in the isolation room, and probably off to that wilderness place. So that is one thing I remember they did threaten a lot, is the wilderness. And there was a few kids that were experienced it and came back to the family school, and it was a cozier, lesser of two evils, the fact that you're not out with the animals and sleeping in tents at night. At least you're in an RV or a camper, whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Or a trailer.
They were trailers. So there was, the boys' side and the girls' side or whatever on the hill. And then down at the bottom of the hill was the school where we all. So rewinding to me just getting out of the car with the escorts, going up into the school, getting inventory, going in and meeting the kid who would be my shadow, I guess they called it, right? And him and I, knowing right what I know afterwards, our personalities were not the same. I was a sports kid. He was an artist. He liked, he was in there. He was allowed to draw and paint because that wasn't perceived as negative to their system, to their program. But me, I'm there, so I feel like even if you were to help the kids in the way they were claiming they were going to, and set up the way they were, why not put the sports kid with the sports kid, or the whatever? It's some sort of common interest, you know what I mean? And
yeah, definitely.
He was also, I mean, he wasn't a bad person, but he was also one of the kids that wasn't court mandated there. So there were certain words, certain lingo that means one thing to us, like a shadow or being on blackout, right? When someone thinks about blackout, that means your power went out. But to us family school kids, blackout meant you can't talk to the opposite sex and you can't talk about this or that. Basically, you're silent.
Right.
So
the school has their own lingo, basically.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah.
I mean,
so that word negative was huge. If I was to go in there talking about a hip hop song or talking about wrestling, WWE, whatever it is, they know that's negative. You know what I mean? You can't talk about that. But anyway, the only reason I brought up the lingo is because one of the words was called walking. That was familiar, especially for someone like me. So walking basically meant that if you're 17, you're about to be 18, on your 18th birthday, you can legally walk out the door and they can't stop you. So the kid who was my shadow had threatened to walk a couple times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it didn't take me long, because I was there for 9 months. 9 months is 270 days, I believe. Had the math right since then. But one of the things for me, like, on that subject alone, right? I had my calendar. Having a calendar is not perceived as negative. So I was literally checking off those days and counting. Once I got past 200, celebrating in my mind that only 70 more days I could walk out the door. So to this day, I'm OCD about my calendar. Like when it's lunchtime, I'll put a half a dash through the day type of shit. You know what I mean? So that's like, speaking out loud is probably something I'll try to stop doing after this podcast. Now that I've put it out there to the world and let everybody know how much of a freaking weirdo I am. So, I mean, maybe I would still have that had I never had this experience, but it just kind of seems a little 1+1 is 2. You know what I mean? Like the fact that I was that obsessive at the time about this calendar because of once I got to that date, I'd be free again. And now to this day, you always got some date coming up. If somebody's birthday, whatever the case may be. So perhaps I'll look forward to certain dates more than I should because of that reason still to this day. So there's damage. And that's kind of the point that maybe I should spend some time on. That's the thing that stood out the most to me, man, watching these other stories, these other guys and girls that went there before me in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after me, we all suffer from very similar social anxieties, trust issues. I don't know how they were with employers, but having a hard ass as a boss because there's those types, you know what I mean? Maybe they mean well, but they come across pretty rough and rugged because they're giving you your paycheck every week. They decide that they can talk to you a certain way or make you feel a certain way, and they kind of don't think twice about it, right? Because in their mind, they're running their business and they're paying you. So
a lot of them, a lot of them didn't speak about their employment, which, that's fine.
I mean, that's something I've struggled with because it's a form of authority, right? And it might bring you back. It might bring you back to those days. I mean, I remember hearing a lot about the nightmares. I haven't really had a family school nightmare, I don't think, in a good amount of time because I have probably a lot of other stuff that's developed in my life afterwards that has just taken so much more importance than while I'm sleeping anyway. Let's put it that way. But I don't mean to downgrade what I was just speaking of with the trauma, the similarities that we all have. I wish I could remember the name of the one gentleman because I watched his podcast the most recently. So he was the one who was stating to you that he reaches out to his mom like a bunch of times a day still, and his relationship is good with her. So
they had Matthew Salerno.
Maybe I'll probably just comment it in the comments afterwards or whatever.
Right, and also Brian Maloney was on here too. Those are the latest ones.
Talked about the sweaty hands a little bit and perspiring a little more than in the average person. That being sort of an effect. So here's my thing about that, right?
Okay.
Who's to say that some of us wouldn't have some of these issues if we never got sent away? I mean, we're living in a world where crazy shit's happened with COVID and everything else, right? Whatever else crazy nonsense happened before that. But like I said, it's just so similar to where the specifics of it. So I'm not going to sit there and go through every one that I recognize. But again, just for whoever is out there and digs thoroughly enough through these podcasts, if you see the similarities, and you're the one who I should be asking, really. So I guess that should be the question. I mean, the most similar things that you see from all of us that that it's still harping on us to this day.
Basically, the mental abuse. I mean, degrading you in front of everybody, embarrassing you, making you feel, this small in front of everybody. That has an effect on people, and some people were, pretty strong when it came, mentally to say, I can beat this, but in the end, it was sometimes more than they could handle. And I understand that. I mean, sooner or later, I mean, no matter how strong you are, sooner or later you're going to break.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because perhaps all of us thought we were a little stronger in that moment than we were. Because
Right.
that's another similar thing I hear from all of us was, yeah, I was the one kid who didn't let it get to me like some of the others. Well, maybe we're all a little bit in denial still about that, for the fact that the signs are still there or whatever. So here's the thing. I mean, people have trauma in their lives, whether it's from a situation like this or some other situation, right? So
Right.
it's very similar how to go about that. I mean, I've definitely spoken to a couple of therapists since then, professional therapists, and the anxiety, getting the panic attacks. A lot of that is like stuff that you got to figure out in your own mind. Set yourself up in situations where are not going to make you feel that way. You know what I mean? And try to set yourself up in a life and explain to others in the healthiest way that you can that I struggle with this on a level that even somebody who has anxiety from something may not. It may be even, you know, enhanced a little bit more at times in certain ways in certain situations.
And it's also one of those things where trust issues.
Yes, huge.
I mean, kids snitching on other kids. You didn't know who to trust, you know?
Right.
Sometimes if you have something you needed to say and, should I tell that person? I don't know if he's gonna, bring it up at table topics, that I end up getting, just fried in front of everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
So
there were some silver linings to my experience alone, if I can get to that part of
go
it.
ahead. Sure.
I mean, there was a time where we were on snow shovel duty, right?
Right.
So we're waking up an hour before everyone else. We're up at 5 in the morning instead of 6, whatever the case may be, and we all go down. So this is a situation that, like, it stands out during my time there, because so kids shoveling snow. For some reason, even the staff didn't have to go out at 5 in the morning and shovel the snow. That's the one activity that they let us just go run amok between each other and figure it out, so to speak.
Well, I'm sure.
Isn't
They
that
knew. I'm sure they knew that nobody was going to run.
not when not when the snow is that deep. And like I said,
Right.
they don't have to go out there themselves. If there's going to be one activity that they decide is going to be okay for them not to, that'd be it. So we're out there, and all of a sudden, what happens, right? You got kids out there with snow. The first snowball comes flying, right? So, and you got these kids that are troubled youths, and they're pretty pissed off about a situation that they're in, that they've been in for months or years, right? So that could turn into a nasty situation, but it doesn't. The next one comes flying, and before you know it, there's smiles and there's laughter, and there's kids that are in this shit situation making the best of it in that moment. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's like shit that you got to do as an adult, big time. You know what I mean? So one thing that I've learned, especially very recently, a statement that's been standing out in my mind, is just to take the good with the bad. So, like, to speak on that same trauma, trust issues, and anxiety stuff, we want everything to be good. I think is kind of, to sum it up. We had bad, we had enough bad for a lifetime. Let's call it that, and we want things to be good. But at our job, right? You got those hours where, if you're the pizza guy, you got those hours where you're making pizza and it's slow, and you're making a couple pies an hour and shooting the shit with your buddy, and but you got the time where you got to sweep the floor, and the time where you're in the weeds where you got to make 100 pies in that hour. So to be able to just say, this is my situation, and to take the good with the bad equally, you know what I mean? It's all part of one situation. It's not that this bad thing is happening to me the same way that we felt that it was in those moments. So that's something that,
It happened to a lot of you, but it happened in different ways,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah. And everybody handled it differently. I mean, they have, people can have the same experience, but yet handle it in different ways. Like I said, some like you got through it. You're still dealing with it, but you're getting through.
Right.
Some people kill themselves. Some people are on drugs and they're never the same. So
right. So if I want to rewind now to my time there, at one point there was a basketball team and there was an academic structure to where you can actually graduate, which would have solved my parents' problem of me not going to school. So I joined the basketball team. And it was pretty ironic at the time that I arrived and the tryouts. I guess the starters for the basketball team, whoever might have been more talented than me at the time, they had all got in trouble from they got caught with porn magazines in the dorm. And they all got kicked off the team.
Oh, all of them.
The whole starting five, from what I remember. So here I am. I got a little bit of athletic skills, but I'm not in love with basketball like I am today. At that time, I'm still a 17-year-old kid. I had interest in dirt bikes and some other stuff, but here I am in this situation, and I go through tryouts and I make the team, and before you know it, I'm on this basketball team. And you know what? The competition was not as difficult to play against than it was in public school from my hometown. In other words, I went from being the 5th or 6th or 10th best kid on the team to one of the top 3. So that's the silver lining for me. I'm still so in love with that sport. I feel like it's saved me big time. Just, it doesn't take much. All a kid needs is the ball and the hoop.
Right.
You don't need pads. You don't need a hockey stick. It's so simple, yet, it's, gratifying. Somebody could sit out there and shoot hoops for hours, and it's so therapeutic, the same way golf is for guys. Once you get into that adult, to play that sport as well is just very therapeutic. So I highly recommend that for anybody to get into. I know Emil was talking, with his jiu-jitsu. That's got to be a big reason, I would assume, to why he originally got into it, for the therapeutic aspects, let alone to kick someone's ass if they ever mess with them. You know what I mean? So.
And sometimes it's football. Not playing it, but watching it can be therapeutic.
And shout out to him. Thank him for what he did to get the place shut down. Very gratifying to hear that. So that's what's up, man.
It took
So he was in a different family at the same time as me, though, but I remember the face and the name. It's kind of a unique name. So
Emil.
I like to listen into his share big time. So shout out to him. So I went through it, saw the brainwashed kids, saw who wasn't. I gelled with a couple of dudes that, again, they showed me how they were doing their push-ups at nighttime, the little workout regimen. The one kid was from the Bahamas, so I got to kind of learn what that would be like, living out there. So anyway, the school aspect of this, I still wasn't into, just like I wasn't in public school. I basically ended up refusing to go to school, refusing the structure, refusing to be 100% brainwashed. Even though I played the game for a little bit while that basketball season was going, I think once the season was over, I was like, didn't have much to play the game for, and act as if I was brainwashed, which I'm sure a lot of us did at times. So I ended up going on that work sanction. So I was telling you real quick on the phone too, that work sanction where you fill a 5-gallon bucket of rocks from a pile and bring it to another location. We were building a rock road. So I'm not trying to justify that anything they did was right, but it does make a little more sense that the kids were taking the rocks from one area to another for some sort of purpose rather than just, but like you said, it wouldn't have surprised us.
No, not at all.
Knowing what you hear, if they would have just had us carrying rocks around the building in a circle, but that's not what it was. It was back from the one pile to build a rock road. And to me, that was kind of, interesting, more interesting than the schooling, as simple as that was. And I noticed that at lunchtime, I was hungrier. So the food was better because I had worked my body harder that day.
Well,
And
it seems like anything was better than the academics. You know what I mean?
yeah, we probably all had a sense that these weren't qualified teachers. They weren't up to par with our public school teachers as far as getting through with the lessons and actually having us learn the information. Or some of us just weren't meant to be the 9 to 5ers with a desk job anyway, which is basically what school is the most similar to. You know what I mean? So
Right.
me, I stayed on the work sanction as long as I could, and to this day, I do physical labor. You know, so I'm not the desk. I'm not a 9 to 5er. I don't have a desk job, and maybe I will. I mean, if something paid enough, I'm sure I could sit behind that desk for those 8 hours. Trust me. But I've just yet to fall into that path. I've more used my hands, work with my body, get tired, go home, eat a nice lunch, and then go to sleep early, try to wake up early, or take a nap. Unfortunately, which that's a kind of a different conversation as far as health goes. I don't know what your stance is, or most people's stances on naps. It seems like people either hate them or love them. There's kind of no in between. So,
Well, my typical day is I'm up at 3:20. I go to work at 5.
holy crap,
Come back at 3:30.
you're a napper.
Hopefully the Brewers game is on and I see them win.
All right, go Brewers.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
not?
yeah.
That's
I'm a
what's up,
big
man.
Brewers fan. I'm a big Green Bay Packer. Well, I'm in Green Bay. That's why. But
Okay.
so yeah, so Green Bay Packers, the
Yeah,
team,
so
man.
the love for sports and what that does, how
Oh yeah,
therapeutic that is, like you
and,
just said, to put the
and
dang game on.
and to tell you the truth, Jarryd, I know, but I'm not a big basketball fan. I don't know. I just
That's
never
fine.
got into. I just
It's all good.
I just never got into it. I don't know why. It
Yeah.
just seems to me. It just seems boring. You know
Right.
what I mean?
No, that's
But to each his own,
no.
right? To each
No,
his own.
exactly, and that's what a sport is going to be if you're not into it. I mean, my
Right.
ex literally said, "You're watching guys take a ball up and down and put it in a hoop over and over again." I mean, when you talk about it that simply, yeah, it sounds boring. But when you get into a favorite player and their favorite moves, and the
Sure.
guy who you can do his moves when you're playing with your neighborhood kids, and before you know it, and the video game era, right? NBA Live and all that, and the Madden. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm on a tangent now.
That's okay.
So I stayed with the work sanction, and I was let out of there a month or two before my 18th birthday. I think they saw that I was probably doing more damage for their program, for their system, for their new kids that they were bringing in by not being one of their brainwashed um, kids that was going to go through their school program. So
Right.
I think they were okay with letting me go. Plus, they were okay with the amount that they racked up by then,
I'm
which I think
sure.
you touched on with one of these other shares.
Right. And to get kind of to rewind a little bit,
Yeah, man.
a
Thank you.
lot of them when you first went in there, I was going to ask the question, but I completely forgot. Did they when you got in there, when you were your initial orientation and all that, did they strip search you and all that stuff like you usually did with all the kids?
I don't remember the whole squat deal, but they throw you in the showers right away. So that's
Yeah.
probably the equivalent. So this is what stands out to me. I was after the roll the kids up in a carpet and duct tape them era, for those of watching
Oh,
confused on just the years alone. So I saw the isolation room. There was an incident where I pushed a kid, and the owner of the school, Mike, brought me to the isolation room, and I smelt the urine, and I looked in there. He made me stand in there with the door open. He said, "I'm not going to close the door," but he said, "This is where you'll be if you do shit like that." You know what I mean? And that was traumatic alone. That
yeah.
5 minutes of standing in that room. So
Well,
anyway,
that's very inhumane treatment, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the kids that got there. I shouldn't phrase it like got put in that isolation room and had to stay there for those same days that I was counting on my calendar. Some of the closest One of the things that stands out, so when I did threaten to run away or did get caught one time, since we had access to computers, I map quested my way home and printed it on the wrong printer. So it popped up someplace else, and I got caught that way, running away. This is pretty fucked up. They made me sleep that night with like mattresses enclosed into my bunk. So picture being on the bottom bunk. You have the mattress above and below, but now they put one on the side, and they put a kid to sleep on the other side of that mattress, so that you don't get let out until that kid lets you out. That
Right.
other brainwashed kid. So I spent one night in there, which, I mean, I'm pretty claustrophobic, so I guess I'm proud of myself in the sense that I got through that or whatever. But there was multiple plans to run away, multiple kids that I saw run away and get taken back by the state troopers with no shoes on, days later. You never saw somebody really run away and make it for months. It was always about a week or two. And
Right.
you saw them getting brung back in shackles.
And
So
that's why they have that place out in the middle of nowhere. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
that alone. I mean, one thing that stands out is there was a couple of other kids that got sent to these other schools, these other boarding schools, and their comment was kind of like, "Well, I don't have many stories about that place, right?" And nothing. There's really nothing that's kind of worth sharing right now. To me, yeah, maybe that's a more normal boarding school, because you don't have these traumatic stories to tell afterwards. It was just a place that got you out of some place where you were getting into trouble for a certain amount of time. You went back home and you
Right.
moved on, in the sense.
Well, with places like this, when you're dealing with a bunch of kids, you need discipline, okay? But
Yes.
there's a difference between discipline and abuse.
You know, it's
Big
so easy to
difference.
go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry, I don't mean
mean,
to cut you off.
taking somebody, let's say if somebody's doing something wrong, right? You take them outside and, one on one, you talk to them. You don't yell at them in front of the whole freaking school. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Wrapping them up in blankets for days. You don't do that. You don't hit them. That kind of
Crazy.
stuff. You know,
Crazy.
there
I
are
mean, they
kids. There are kids that need to be hit sometimes, but you got to refrain.
and I
You know what I
believe
mean?
and I believe it's much like almost like a puppy. If you get if you get a dog and raise it right from a puppy, and maybe smack it in the butt a few times when it
Sure.
acts out as a puppy, that's going to be a lot more effective than smacking a full grown dog afterwards, when it's set
Right.
in its ways. It's ate this certain thing for this certain amount of time. It's practice this certain behavior for a certain amount of years, and now you're trying to give it that same, a smacking on the butt is something that we all needed at one point in time, and it's something that is a gray area, because unfortunately there is a lot of piece of crap parents that have abused their kids. So now on the other end of the spectrum, it's like you can't even yell at them too hard without those other
Right.
parents batting an eye, thinking that you might be one of those. You get what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
It's made
Like
things a lot more difficult
like you said, if you have your kids and you discipline them correctly, they're going to respect you.
at a young enough age. Yeah.
If you abuse them, they're going to resent you. They're going to
100%.
hate you. You know
And
what I mean?
they're gonna hate anybody that they come across that reminds them of you, or whatever the case may be. So
Right.
here's the thing about that. To me, it's pretty simple, man. The kids that respond to tough love, because that's what we're talking about here. Tough love, right?
Right.
That's what the generation before mine, how they phrased it. I am one of those people, I'm telling you right now, that responded terribly to that. I was better off with compassion, even if it takes taking me out of an environment. The way I needed to be spoken to and leveled with was not this. It was not yelling. It was not I am and you know what? I don't know why that is exactly 100%, but
Yeah.
I can sort of tell with younger, kids that I've been around, my ex's nephews and nieces, or whatever the case may be. You can almost tell when someone shuts down at a young age like that. You know what I mean? You're trying to give them that tough love, and they completely shut down. At that point, you have to take a different approach, plain and
Yeah.
simple, or otherwise you are doing damage. You are hurting them worse.
Yeah, and if worse comes to worse, maybe you might need to take him to a professional, like a a
Yes.
therapist or something like that.
Yeah.
To
I
make
mean, they're
sure
good.
that
It's a tough. I mean, I may be speaking too bluntly for certain people. It's a situational thing. You know what I mean? There's definitely kids out there and parents that, like you just said, they need an outside hand. They need help, and maybe they need something different than both of the options I just said. Sort of the tough love or the soft love, whatever you want to call it. Maybe they just need some other sort of thing. You know.
right,
And I can't speak on that. I'm not educated enough,
right. Everybody's
experienced
different.
enough.
Yeah.
So
What
my heart goes out to the kids that are, and the parents that are going through those situations that I just spoke of. The most
now?
extreme.
Now, when you were talking at the beginning about how when you were in the car and they were driving you, you were remembering the curve, the every turn, and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
When you left, finally,
yeah.
did you remember?
No, fuck no, absolutely not.
So
Probably after the 10th turn, your mind goes. You know what I mean? I'm not a freaking
yeah,
genius when it comes to memory, memory stuff like that. So
right. You're like,
that's
yeah,
funny.
you forget it, and then by the time it's all over, it's like, oh, well. But
Mhm.
you never tried to run though, did you? You
No, because
never
I didn't
tried.
want to become court mandated.
Yeah,
I knew that at that 270-day mark, that at my 18th birthday, I'd be able to walk out. And I got out a couple months in advance, like I said. So I think it was a big part, probably my parents at that point, from the messages that they. So I was there, unfortunately, when the gentleman killed himself too. So that was
oh,
probably may have been part of the reason. It was slightly easier for me to persuade my parents to take me out the 2 months in advance than it would have been some of these other kids. So, and I remember when that happened, I didn't, see the kid's body, but I saw people running, the the feeling in the air when something like that's going on. And they did take us up to the chapel for church and whatever, explain to us what happened. I mean, my heart goes out to that gentleman's family. There's really no words I can used to describe. He was obviously, that family was obviously one of the ones most impacted, as well as a couple others that I could think of. There was one gentleman from my town who got sent there that overdosed and passed away a few years ago. You know what I mean? My heart goes out to him and his family.
yeah,
And I'm a spiritual person. I pray for kids. I see. So right now, like I said, I do manual labor. I'm on the. So what's big right now is Facebook groups and all those sort of people coming together on communities and venting their problems and looking for work and stuff to home improvements and stuff. So I see these posts about a kid going through it, and I comment. I'm like, if I can talk to him, I will. Please let me talk to this kid free of charge. You know what I mean? I think that's what I needed back then too. Because when someone's getting paid to talk to you, that if you're a smart enough kid, it is a business to a certain degree, and you can tell it's all just the
a,
underlying vibes
a,
behind it. You know what I mean?
a lot of kids seem to think that the problems that they're going through, they're basically the only ones that are going through it or have gone through it. And when they get
Yeah,
people like you and some of the other people who went there to say, "Hey, I went through the same thing. You're not alone, man." That kind
yeah,
of that kind of helps. You
yeah. It
know,
has helped for sure. Thank you to everyone else that shared their story, and yeah, man. When I got out of there, this is another thing. When I got home, most of the kids, because I was sent there for weed. Um, they viewed it as I went to rehab. That's damaging enough right there. And you try to explain to someone the difference between a boarding school and a rehab and whatever the case may be. So they don't understand. Nobody really understands when you get out and you try to go back amongst. Like I try to go back amongst a lot of the same peers. You know what I mean? Some of them were humored by it. You know what I mean? They thought it was funny that that I got sent away and whatever else. So I mean, it's
right,
just difficult. But those are the things that parents probably don't think about when they're making these decisions. And
right,
I've definitely have my fair share of resentment with my mom and dad, but shout out to them. They're good people. They mean well, and I know that if they would have heard all these stories, right, and hindsight 2020, they wouldn't have made the decision. They would have chosen another option.
And
I believe that.
Plus, the internet was pretty young back then, and
Yeah,
you didn't have all these forums and these podcasts, or even you didn't even have YouTube until
no.
probably 2007 or 6, something like that.
Well, the guidance counselor that convinced my mother, especially, they were friendly from the town. You know what I mean? They were friends.
Yeah,
So it was probably a little easier to get me sent away than some of these other kids. But
well, yeah, usually there's a lot of people that don't have a very good, with their parents, as far as like a relationship with their parents because of these. But you have to say, you have to think to yourself, hey, they're human, man. They make mistakes just like everybody else.
yeah,
It was a major mistake,
yeah.
but still, I mean, they're human, and
Nobody's gonna be able to raise your kids better than you for the
there's
most part in a
right,
lot of situations. I'm not
and
saying everybody, but
and there's no manual. I got 2 children of my own. I mean, they're grown-ups now, but you don't have
yeah,
a manual for a kid. You just have to. It's a trial and error thing.
yeah, you're growing with them. You're experiencing this with them.
Right.
This parent
Yeah.
to childhood relationship. So, I do use marijuana still to calm my anxiety, and maybe that's something that I should experiment trying to get away from, but that's a kind of a different battle, you know what I mean, in the sense
Right.
that I was smoking before and after the school. So, but it does help me. I've heard your take on it. You're definitely not opposed to if it helps, but it's like anything else. You abuse it, and it's got its bad side effects too.
Right.
That'll put you to sleep,
Right.
whatever. Take your motivation away. So, one thing I did is I did cut out booze from my life. I haven't really drank since New Year's I'm not. It hasn't been that long, but since 2023, and that's been helpful for my anxiety. I noticed that when I did get a couple beers in me or whatever it was at the end of the night, when you get back home, if that night didn't go exactly how you wanted, your brain started spinning a little bit more than it does when you're just uh, uh, a
Right.
weed user like myself. It
And
doesn't do it.
beers or alcohol is a depressant, so
Being
makes.
hungover is not
Oh,
fun. The whole 9 yards. I mean, shout out to anybody who else is taking that leap of faith with me and trying to stay sober from alcohol. I'm definitely not one of those who tries to look down on anybody who does still drink. You know what I mean? I'd like
yeah.
to be someone who can shoot the shit with someone while they have a beer in their hand. You know what I mean? But the drunk asshole, I'm not. I obviously want nothing to do with, and I didn't when I was drinking either. I like to think, although I was probably became one a couple times. But anyway, man, thank you again. I see the time we're coming up on, getting closer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, Jarryd, thank you for coming on, sharing your story. It was
Yeah, I'm
like,
sure there's some things I was gonna want to say afterwards. I'm just, damn it, I should have said this or that, but I guess I could always comment a thing or two.
sure.
But
Yeah, a lot of people. It takes a lot of people find this when they go on this podcast and talk about it. It's therapeutic as well. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Just get it out there, and you feel better.
yeah. To anybody going through their emotional shit, I mean, you're not alone. You got to remember to breathe. You got to breathe. Try to breathe as properly as possible. I'm a big fan of walking out of a certain room or a certain setting if it
Right.
doesn't feel right. And it might not feel right because of you, and it might not feel right because of them. But who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? It's just the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is it doesn't feel right in that moment for you. So walk away. Go for a walk.
Get some fresh air. Yeah.
Take a steaming hot shower, and then turn that shower to cold right at the very end, just for a couple seconds. You know what I mean? Shock your body, do your workouts, whatever you got to do. Those are the things that have been proven to help. That mind and body connection I've found is huge to me. So when I'm stagnant, when I can't work, when I don't get enough sun, when I don't move enough, that anxiety, that depression creeps in,
Creeps
and
in. Yeah.
simultaneously, man, it's like a clutch. It's like driving. So anyway, thanks
All
again.
right.
Thank you to everyone else. I hope that any place that's still operating the way this place did gets shut down and that justice gets brought upon the owners of that place or whoever is in charge, whoever's pockets are getting greased for just so that while that's happening, people's lives are getting affected for years and years and years.
Right.
So,
and to anybody who
that's
is,
what I pray.
and to anybody who went to the Family Foundation School and you want to come on,
share your story. You'll definitely feel a little bit better afterwards.
The number's on top of the channel page. It's down here, scrolling across. So, all right, Jarryd, well, you have a good evening, my friend.
Thank you. Later. God bless.
Yep. So, like I said, on the 14th, which is tomorrow, Jonna's going to be back for part 2. She went to Happiness Hill, home for girls, in, I believe it was Union, Mississippi. So she'll be back tomorrow at 5:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure to click the notification button on that. On the 27th, Carissa will be back. Carissa went to the Victory Christian Academy in Pace, Florida. They feel that they didn't say all that they needed to say, so we're giving them another hour to do that. The 28th, James Swift will be on the podcast. He also goes by the stage name of Fifi Frost. He's a published author of 2 books, and we will be talking about gender conversion therapy and drag shows, what goes on. I've been to a couple. I think they're quite wonderful and, exciting. So there's a lot of, see the guys in women's clothing walking around. It's a lot of fun. If you've never been to one, please go to one. All right. So for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. All right. Like the video. That way it gets circulated around more. And for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. Take care of yourself. You take care of each other. And we'll see you in the next podcast tomorrow. All right. 5:00. Be there.